Shalom. Call halal Yahweh Bashem Awashai Bahasham Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles, double honors unto the elder bishops, salutations to all my fellow laborers, doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so now more so than ever. To the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth, that be like unto the speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners among the heathen that look like the heathen. And to the Akwath that are listening and learning to you, I say Shalom. This is your brother Malcolm from the branch of the Great Millstone here in Chicago, coming at you with another lesson in truth. And as you can see, the title of this video, I just happened to come across this video. It says, why schools will never teach about black culture, all right? And then it has a deeper title. It says why they, well, I'll just let it speak. And then I'm going to go right into the scriptures.
In this video, we'll be uncovering the role of African Americans in the founding of the United States. When we think about the founding of the United States, the names that often come to mind are George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin. But what about the contributions of African Americans?
Now, they're showing you, a man of color, which is more than likely a Gadite, a native, all right? Because you got to remember, the census enumerators, any native that looked, that had so-called black features, they would reclassify them as black, with their false system of blood quadrant, because it's weird how they'll allow a white person, if they have so many 2/8, 1/8 Cherokee and all that kind of mess, but then you'd have a native, all right, and if they had one drop of black blood, you were black, regardless of what you look like. You see the hypocrisy in that, all right? If your father was a so-called native and your mother was a so-called Negro, well, you were just a Negro, all right? But if one of your parents were white, especially your father, you were whatever they say you were, as long as one of your parents wasn't black. So you can see the imbalance, all right, the lie, the falseness in that whole doctrine. Really think about it. I'll say it again. They will allow a person like them Dawes Roll Indians, those $5 Indians, basically white people who signed the Dawes Roll so that they can get benefits of natives, and we're not natives at all. And a lot of those people are still around today receiving benefits that have been passed on from generation to generation. Well, they will come with this blood quadrant thing and say, well, if it turns out that I'm 7/8 or, a 9/10, a Blackfoot. So, but there's someone who was a so-called Negro. They had one drop, their father could have been a Blackfoot. But if their mom was a so-called black woman, or even if their mother's father or their mother's mother was a so-called black woman and everybody else was native, it didn't matter. You weren't a native anymore. So you see the hypocrisy in it. All right. Second thing they showed you was three of America's founding forefathers, and the one I'm focusing on is Ben Franklin, because we're gonna read a letter that he wrote, which is condemning evidence. And I keep saying that they eventually are going to scrub this off the internet. Wait a minute. Hey, Shalom, bottom right. I just started a video. Can I hit you back? All right, but you good? Okay, Shalom, I hit you back. Yeah, that was my son, or else I wouldn't have picked it up. So Salakia. But yeah, speaking about that letter with Ben Franklin, we're gonna probably, touch on that before this is all over. But there's no need to watch this video any further, because they're calling them African Americans and they're calling them black. And I don't know how many videos I've done, and the apostles, the elders, or the brothers have done. We're not African, we're not American, and we definitely aren't black. Black is a color. It's also a very negative and ugly word. And so to attach a people to it was actually, and because we didn't call ourselves that, they started calling, our brothers, the Southern Kingdom, that, and they started calling them, and they had a very derogative meaning by it. As a matter of fact, when you put black in front of anything, or black behind anything, and it's actually it gives it a very negative connotation. You make it so black, it means ugly, it means bad, deceitful, death, void of light, without understanding, gloomy, unethical, immoral. Then you got people that want to still, promote black excellence. So you evil excellently, you're ugly excellently, you're stupid excellently, you don't know anything excellently. So they still want to cleave to these false titles, and we really get tired. And so it's really racist and hateful, for these so-called white people to continue to call us that. And then it's really ignorant for people who are physically and visibly brown, like the two people in the corner of the video. You see the so-called Negro woman and the so-called Negro man up there in the corner. They're brown, chocolate brown. The guy on the screen with the so-called white man, who looks like a Native American, by the way, he's brown. All right. So, but let me read the scripture. This is Isaiah 29:15, and it reads, "Warn to them that seek deep to hide their counsel from Yahweh, and their works are in the dark, and they say, who seeth us and who knoweth us?" So they lie and try to hide our nationality and our race, and that's a very hateful hateful thing to do, and then lash out at you and reverse the roles when you wake up and find out who you are, when you actually see the evidences, which is overwhelming evidence to prove that what we say about who we are is true. All right, though they continue to try to deny it and ignore facts. Verse 16, Isaiah 29:16. "Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. For shall the work say of him that made it, he hath made me not? Or shall the thing framed say to him that framed it, he had no understanding?" So, these people think they're smarter than the Lord. They think they're going to outwit the Lord, and they're not. All right. And let's go to a image, because they call them African. Well, what you're looking on the screen is Scipio Africanus. All right. Scipio Africanus, Africa is named after him, a so-called white Roman general, a so-called white man who wasn't even called white until 1681. All right. 95 years before America came into existence and the Constitution was written. They had already deemed themselves white when they wrote the Constitution, and then they talking about this whole African American thing. We just showed you that Africa is named after a so-called white man. So you are named after a white man, and that's your race, that's your nationality. And guess what? And then you got some that scream, "Well, I'm a black Asiatic man." Well, here's Africanus' brother, Lucius Cornelius Scipio Asiaticus, his brother, a so-called white man. Africa and Asia are named after so-called white men. So saying you're Asian or African is really not a nationality at all, and that goes to prove that they are the nation of Edom. Psalms 49:11 tells you how they name lands after their own names, after themselves, and they change landmarks. So anything that they teach you, these people are just going to teach you lies, and they whitewash history to benefit themselves. So you have to go back to before America, about 95 years before, give or take a few or more. There was something called the Bacon's Rebellion. All right. And in this rebellion, you had the poor people, which made up so-called blacks, so-called natives, so-called Chinese, and so-called white men. All right. Who were all working for, some were indentured servants, indentured slaves, and working off debts. And then you had a group of so-called Negroes in America referred to as the Huguenots. All right. The Huguenots were expelled from Portugal and Spain. All right. So let's start there, and then we'll work our way up to Bacon's Rebellion. But the Huguenots were expelled from Spain. And matter of fact, let's bring that up. The expulsion of the Moriscos. All right. Moors, Moriscos, Jews, and Huguenots. Well, guess what? When you look up Moreno it says a Jew or a Moor in Spain. Now we know who the Moors are. The Moors were not, they may have worshipped Islam, but the Moors were so-called black men. And they weren't Africans either, like they try to say that they were. You understand that? It's telling you that a Moreno or a Jew. A Moreno is a Jew or a Moor, because the so-called, and they were crypto Jews. And they were expelled out of Portugal and Spain and France, and they scattered across Europe and into America. And these men were here in the colonies, helping to set up America in its beginning. And they tried to cover up and hide this history. All right. And like I often tell you, the Moors and the Morenos were some of the biggest race traders that our nation has ever seen, because what they were owning slaves. Moors came over here and they were owning some of the their own people from the natives, their own people, the Northern Kingdom, and they also were owning some of their own people from the Northern Kingdom as slaves. All right, this is all very true. Just like you even had some Gadites that owned the Southern Kingdom, so-called Negroes as slaves, and these were people who were all working with Esau Edom, the so-called white man in the 13 original colonies. All right. So let's fast forward from the time of the fall of Portugal and Spain, and explosion, the diaspora, explosion of the Moors, the Moriscos, who were called the Huguenots. All right. Now, when you watch this video, they're going to show you white people as Huguenots, but we just read the definition of what a Moreno is, and we know what. Matter of fact, Hispanic people still refer to dark Hispanics, brown-skinned Hispanics, or so-called black Hispanics, as Morenos or Morenas, still to this day. All right, and it's telling you that that's a Jew or more. So, duh. All right. As a matter of fact, let's go to the scriptures, because they seek deep to hide their counsel. This is one of my favorite scriptures, speaking on the Southern Kingdom, the so-called Jews, the Judites, the real children of Israel, the Israelites. This is Lamentation 4:8. And it reads, their visage, meaning when you look upon them, is blacker than a coal. They are not known in the streets. Why? Because they're being called Moors, Moriscos. They were once called Huguenots. They were called Negroes, niggers, coloreds. It said, but this is talking about the Southern Kingdom, which were made up the kingdom of Judah, which was Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. All right. But it says their visage, meaning when you look at them, is blacker than a coal. They are not known in the streets. Their skin cleaveth to their bones. It is withered. It has become like a stick. So these people are dark, melanated people, just like Ben Franklin said in his letter, except, Esau Edom tries to attach everything dark to Africa, which is a lie, because the whole world was dark or tawny, which he admits in his book. Europe was dark and tawny before the so-called white man took it over. All right. And then lost it to the so-called Negroes, and then retook it over. That's called the Renaissance. All right. The rebirth. Okay. So let's fast forward to the future. Let's fast forward to the time now of the 1681. So we're leaving the expulsion in the fall of Portugal and Spain, 1492, when Cristobal Colon sailed to America to find the Northern Kingdom Israelites, and brought 5 Hebrew interpreters with him, Louis de Torres being one of them. Undeniable fact. So, F what you're saying, that everything I'm telling you is factual, can be looked up and proven to be exactly as I've said. All right, so we're leaving at 1492. We're fast forwarding to 1681, during this rebellion, when all these poor indentured servants and this rainbow coalition of so-called black, whites, natives, and Chinese, for the most part, were working together and coming against the wealthy white class, and who at that time came up with this whole whiteness. That was the time, in the year, and the time, and the date, and the place was Virginia, West Virginia, 1681, where any group of humanity was first called white. And so what they did was to break up this bond and this union that was led by and I always forget the guy's name. I believe he was a so-called white man. Bacon. They was led by this guy. I forget his first name. But this Bacon guy. It was called this rebellion because he was like the lead guy of this rebellion, the number one guy or spokesperson. To ensure that would never happen again, they granted whiteness to the people who fraudulently referred to themselves as Anglo-Saxon. All right, because when they were coming from Ireland, Scotland, Germany, the Netherlands, and all these places, which they weren't calling themselves white. The few that may have come from those places, all right, they didn't call themselves white till they got here. As a matter of fact, Benjamin Franklin described all the people in the lands that I just said that are full of Caucasians today, so-called. He described all those people as being black and tawny. We're gonna read his letter as evidence. So in this 1681, when this whiteness was created and granted to these people, it gave them front of the line privileges. All right, it gave them the right to vote, the right to own firearms. It gave them immunity to justice from people of melanated people. So, and it also guaranteed that they got to. It prevented the white women who were choosing to marry black men and native men, most of all, even sometimes the Chinese men. And at this time, it put them in a position where if they married them, then they inherited their condition. All right, which was a slave, because the natives in the colonies, most of them that were conquered were sold as slaves right down into the south, put on slave ships, and were transferred back and forth, and many to Seville, Spain, because Seville, Spain became the reverse slave capital of the world. That is what happened. So whiteness was created, and all these former landowners and Huguenots, these sellouts, became victims of their own folly, of the same people that they made alliances with. The movie 12 Years a Slave is perfect evidence of that fact. What they did to this North, whatever his name was, Northup, or however you said his name, was perfect evidence. That guy was a Huguenot. Okay? So, so by the time you fast forward now from 1681 to this creation of whiteness, you fast forward up to 1776 to the time of the American Revolution and the writing of the Constitution. You so-called black people weren't a part of it, but yet they're trying to teach you in this video all your contributions and things that you did, and then they're calling you Africans and slaves, not mentioning anything about the Huguenots and that you were landowners and none of that. Oh, well, they did kind of. Son of a. Shut the hell up.
Contributions.
All right. And that you would see, these aren't slaves. That man was voting. See, this is when they telling themselves. I was just trying to get to an image and they put a goddamn commercial.
Would have been successful in their fight for independence.
Where is it?
Today,
there we go.
Can honor their legacy.
Right there. There's a man with a button-down shirt and a hat on, voting. He's not in a and look at them. They're mad. All right. Okay. But this man is voting. He's voting. All right. So they're fabricating the history. What they're doing is trying to, that you're fighting for freedom and all this other stuff. But when the Constitution was drafted, it referred to you as 2/3 of a man. As a matter of fact, the song that commemorates this battle, everyone knows that, or should know at this point, the third verse of the Star Spangled Banner is singing against the Negro, and that you would always be a slave and that you would die. All right, go and that freedom was not for you. And then these people got the nerve to get angry when people don't want to stand up for the national anthem. All right, listen to the third verse, and that's just it. But they don't even want to look at that or consider that there's a verse talking about your death and extermination and how you will always be a slave and nothing better and nothing more. But yet they want you to stand up to it today. Man, I tell you. All right. So let's go to this letter now. that Ben Franklin wrote. You know, and this is all prophecy that Esau Edom would be exposed, that all this stuff would be brought out, and he would be shamed in these last days. So this is Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind, 1751, written by one of America's four founders, Ben Franklin. And this is what he had to say about the inhabitants of the world and America. And this is the last paragraph, paragraph 24 in the letter. And it reads, let me just make it larger so I can see it. All right, and it reads, which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionally very small. Okay, all of Africa is black or tawny. All right, so meaning, you know, you look dark brown like an Arab, or you know, or you would, you know, or you would dark chocolate like a so-called Negro. Now remember, Negroes and Africans are not the same people. They even look different. All right, they really do. They don't look the same. Now, you know, there's been some intermingling, you know, but that's why you had a place in Africa called Negro Land. All right, and then the rest of Africa was called Africa. You got maps from the 1780s that called West Africa the Negro Land. Why? Because the Negro in Africa, look, when it's on all the slave signs from the slave trade, always said African. I mean, it always said Negro slaves. It never said African slaves, because Africans were selling Negroes, a different dark race of people. They conveniently leave that out of history, the historical narrative as well. All right. Now there are some few cases, because you can always get some scoffer where you know, Israelites were selling other Israelites, but for them it still was orchestrated by Esau Edom, the so-called white man, Ham, you know, Tyre and Zidon, as is written in the Bible, in the coast of Palestine, you know, so-called Arabs. And in the movie Roots, around the 40th minute, if you watch the original movie Roots, they show you Joel, the 3rd chapter, right there. They show you a white man, an African man, a Hamite, a Hamitic dark man, a brown-skinned Arab man, all right, and a so-called white man. And that was Joel, the 3rd chapter, coming to life. Those were the main three that came together to capture the southern kingdom out of the west coast of Africa, which had places like Fort Judah and Fort Benjamin. All right. Okay. So back to the letter. And it says, all Africa is black or tawny, Asia chiefly tawny, America exclusive of the newcomers. And so it's telling you that America was black and tawny. Why? Because of these men who lived in the colonies that were already helping to set it up. These men that they had to make laws to prevent them from marrying, who were marrying these white women, that they may have to make these laws to prevent black men from marrying them. All right, because it was, you know, a shortage of women, and the women were coming to the New World. White women were coming to the New World, and quite frankly, they were choosing BBC over red boys who call themselves white, as he's gonna even prove in his letter that, you know, when it says in Edom, and the first came out red, so the so-called, you know, the real red man, who's the so-called, changed his name to white most recently. That's the latest name that he goes by now. All right. But it says, as Asia chiefly tawny, America exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. And in Europe, the Spaniards, the Italians, listen closely, the French, the Russians, the Swedes, are generally of what we call swarthy complexion. Swarthy means black. And these swarthy men, these swarthy Spaniards, these were the people who got expelled. These were the people who became the Huguenots. Or I'll read it again. And in Europe, the Spaniards, the Italians, the French, the Russians, the Swedes are generally what we call a swarthy complexion. He just called them black people. All right? As are the Germans also. So all these places are occupied by mainly and ruled over by so-called white people today. And they don't share this history with you at all. All right. It says also, and it says the Saxons only accept it. So they're trying to claim that they're the Anglo-Saxons, the angelic sons of Isaac, and they're not, because he just told you, oh yeah, because that would make them the Scotch, the Irish, and the Brits, and no, they were not that either. Okay, but it says, who with the English make up the principal body of white people on the face of the earth, and I wish their numbers were increased. And while we are, as I may call it, scouring our planet for clearing America of its woods, and so making this side of the globe reflect the brighter light of the eyes of the inhabitants in Mars, or Venus. So that's the gods that they worship. When it says in God we trust, they were never talking about the God of the Hebrews as they're claiming to be. He just admitted it, because the angelic sons of Isaac would not be worshiping gods from Mars and Venus. Esau, Edom was, when they took over Greece from the brown-skinned European Etruscans, all right, and became the Grecians and the Romans later on. But it says, we should, why should we, in sight of superior beings, darken his people? Why increase the sons of Africa? There's that lie again. So they're pushing that hard, trying to make the Negroes Africans when they know that they're Israelites. All right. As a matter of fact, what's the book with I look like I'm gonna run out of time. I have to do a part 2.